It was a crisp autumn morning in New York City, with the soft golden sunlight filtering through the windows of the towering skyscrapers. On the 50th floor of one of these buildings, Althea Thorne, the CEO of the leading technology company Thorne Innovations, sipped her hot black coffee, her eyes scanning the market analysis dashboard. Her appearance was startlingly simple. A plain cream sweater, black tailored pants, and her naturally curly hair neatly tied up. No flashy jewelry, no ostentatious designer logos. It wasn't because she didn't own such things. It was because she didn't want to. She wanted to be recognized for her ideas and her work, not the glamorous facade. Throughout her life, she had fought against the stereotypes that were often imposed on a black woman, too assertive, too quiet, too ambitious. And she had learned to turn those twos into her secret weapons. Althea had everything in her hands, yet deep down she felt a certain loneliness. It was the price of being a trailblazer, of always being a step ahead. She often sought human connection, something this cold business world often lacked. At times, she would touch the simple gold necklace around her neck. It was a keepsake from her mother, Eleanor Thorne, a civil rights lawyer who had spent her life fighting for justice. The pendant was engraved with the words, "Dignity always." It was her guiding principle, a reminder that true strength was not in a loud voice, but in quiet, powerful silence. Not far away, in the old Bank of Sterling branch, the atmosphere was entirely different. It was a place where tradition and conservatism reigned, where appearance mattered more than ability. Brittany Miller, a young teller with neatly tied blonde hair, was laughing with her colleague. She was dressed in the bank's standard attire, a navy suit, white shirt, and a pearl necklace that her parents had gifted her on her graduation day. Brittany came from a wealthy family but always felt looked down upon. Her father, a successful investor, always told her she wasn't quite there yet. This dissatisfaction turned into a fake arrogance. Brittany longed to prove herself, but lacked the patience to hone her skills. She saw herself as the elite, viewing anyone who dressed simply as a pretender, trying to step into her world. The relationship between Brittany and branch manager Robert Hughes was one of silent complicity. Robert, a middle-aged conservative man, believed he could see through people by their appearance. He saw in Brittany a younger version of himself, someone with potential in the way he defined it. Thus, he often overlooked complaints about her attitude, believing she would be the one to maintain the branch's image. This shielding created a culture of silence, an unspoken affirmation that discrimination was still accepted. A few weeks earlier, an internal report had pointed out issues with customer service at the branch. But Robert had buried it, fearing negative evaluation from his superiors. This only fueled the simmering dissatisfaction among employees like Sofia Rodriguez, a young Latina teller who always sought promotion but felt unfairly treated. She worked hard, learning constantly, yet opportunities seemed to slip away. That morning, Althea had a call with her assistant, Liam Carter. They were in the final stages of a $2 billion merger with Evergreen Logistics. A complex but groundbreaking deal. Amidst the dozens of emails and meetings, Althea received a message from the Harris family, longtime employees of Evergreen Logistics. The warehouse manager, their father, had passed away suddenly. Althea made a personal decision that went beyond work. She would withdraw $20,000 in cash herself to help the family with funeral expenses. A small act, but to her it was those moments that gave true meaning to success. She believed a great leader not only managed assets, but also human values. And to show her respect, she wanted to deliver the money herself. She had no idea that this human gesture would be the beginning of a storm. One morning, Althea stepped out of her tower. Unlike usual, there was no luxury car waiting. She chose to walk a few blocks, enjoying the crisp autumn air. A simple leather bag rested on her shoulder, containing only a wallet, car keys, and her phone. everything she needed for this mundane task. As she passed through the busy streets, she observed the people around her. They were the real New Yorkers, a young woman rushing with a coffee cup, a sharply dressed office worker talking on the phone with tension, an elderly man sitting on a bench reading the newspaper. In that moment, Althea felt herself blend in as a part of the city, not as a billionaire CEO. The Bank of Sterling stood before her, its large glass doors reflecting the sunlight. It appeared majestic, but carried an air of antiquity, like a relic of a bygone era. Althea walked in. The air inside was cool but tense. The clatter of keyboards, the soft ring of phones, and whispered conversations blended together. She stood in line patiently waiting her turn. In the waiting area, an older man, Thomas Wells, sat. He was a board member of Evergreen Logistics, a partner in the upcoming merger with Thorne Innovations. Thomas was a principled man working according to his values. He had heard Althea's assistant mention that she would personally come here for a small task. Curious about the woman who would soon become his partner, he decided to stay and observe. His eyes scanned the room and then rested on Althea. He could sense a calmness and poise emanating from her, something he rarely saw in young business people today. Behind the counter, Brittany Miller was laughing loudly with her colleague. She was annoyed at having to handle small transactions, dreaming of a higher position where she could run everything from a private office. She and her colleague often judged customers by appearance, and with someone dressed as simply as Althea, they assumed she was unimportant. Althea stepped up to the counter, her gaze meeting Brittany's. Brittany's professional smile didn't reach her eyes. Instead, there was a scrutinizing look scanning Althea from head to toe. In that instant, Althea felt the negative judgment and unequal treatment waiting for her. But she didn't show it calmly, saying, "Good morning." "Good morning," Brittany replied, her sarcastic smile never fading. Her eyes quickly scanned Althea's simple leather bag. "How may I assist you?" "I'd like to withdraw some money," Althea said, her voice calm, sliding her debit card across the counter. $20,000. That statement seemed to flip a switch, causing all expressions on Brittany's face to change. Her eyebrows furrowed in discomfort. She glanced quickly at Carson, a colleague working at the counter beside hers. A look of skepticism and mockery passed between them. $20,000? Brittany repeated, stressing each word, her voice dripping with doubt. "In cash." Althea nodded calmly. "Yes, in cash." Brittany turned back to Althea, but this time there was no professionalism, just an overly patient fake demeanor. Slowly, she reached into the drawer, pulling out a form and a pen. "I'll need to see your ID." Althea handed her driver's license. She could feel Brittany's eyes scrutinizing every tiny detail on it. Her gaze wasn't just looking for information. She was searching for a reason to decline. From his glass office, Robert Hughes was also watching. He didn't intervene, just observing, his eyes curious and silently approving. "And what is this money for?" Brittany asked, her tone judgmental, as though this question were a mandatory procedure. "Personal matters," Althea answered briefly, her gaze unwavering. Brittany pouted, unable to hide her disappointment that Althea didn't offer a juicy story for her to mock. She began entering the data slowly, deliberately dragging out the process. Meanwhile, Althea's phone buzzed. A message from her assistant, Liam. "The deal is ready for signing. Evergreen's team is waiting." Althea placed her phone down. She knew her time was valuable, but she remained patient. Her silence was not waiting. It was assessing. She was observing how a small world operated, one where old prejudices could still cause unnecessary troubles. Little did she know this was the moment when she would realize that this situation was larger than just a small transaction. Brittany stared at her computer screen with a scowl. It wasn't because the system was malfunctioning, but because she was intentionally dragging out the process. Every keystroke was exaggerated, each check accompanied by a dramatic sigh of apparent suffering, as if she were engaged in the most strenuous and difficult task imaginable. Her eyes briefly flicked towards Carson, the colleague who had giggled earlier. An invisible complicity passed between the two, a private language of those who consider themselves the center of the world, judging others by their appearance. Althea stood there silent. She didn't check her phone, didn't show any signs of discomfort. She simply observed. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Strength is not in the loudest voice, but in the silence that carries weight. She had learned to turn moments like these into opportunities for observation. She could see the insecurity behind Brittany's arrogance, the cowardice behind Robert Hughes's indifference as he lingered near the counter. Finally, Brittany finished the tasks on her computer. She took a stack of cash from the drawer and began to count it. Each bill was flipped slowly with exaggerated showmanship accompanied by sarcastic comments. $20,000 is quite a sum, she said loudly enough for the customers in line behind her to hear. Hope you have a safe place to store it. Her tone was both condescending and laced with open suspicion, as if doubting whether Althea could keep such an amount. Althea remained calm, offering no reaction. Her silence only fueled Brittany's frustration, pushing her to go further. After finishing the count, Brittany stacked the bills neatly and slammed them down onto the counter to straighten them. It was a move meant to assert control, a display of false authority. Here you go, she said, pushing the stack of bills toward Althea with a sharp flick of her wrist. The push wasn't accidental. It was a calculated, deliberate action. The stack of money hit the edge of the counter, and the bills scattered across the marble floor. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Althea watched as the bills fluttered through the air and fell at her feet. An eerie silence descended upon the bank, broken only by the faint sound of breathing. Brittany raised her hand to her mouth, feigning surprise. But her eyes glinted with a glimmer of satisfaction. Carson, her colleague, covered his mouth to suppress his laughter, but his eyes betrayed a gleam of malicious enjoyment. Althea stood motionless for a moment. Her gaze, dark and deep, met Brittany's. In Althea's eyes there was no anger or hurt, only calm and cold judgment, making Brittany feel a flicker of discomfort. Then, with a gentle, unhurried motion, Althea knelt down. That action was not one of submission, but a powerful act of defiance. She didn't bow her head to the humiliation. She showcased her self-respect. Slowly, she picked up each bill, folding them carefully and intentionally. The motion was deliberate and meaningful, as if she wanted everyone there to witness it. Whispers began to ripple through the room. A man in line checked his watch impatiently. Another employee whispered to a colleague. They were all spectators, and they all chose silence. At the back of the hall, Thomas Wells observed the entire scene. He felt a tightening discomfort in his chest. As a principled man, he knew what he was witnessing was wrong. He wanted to say something to intervene. But part of him, trained by many years in the business world, where silence was golden, held him back. Don't make a scene. This is their private issue, those thoughts echoed in his mind. He felt a deep sense of shame and cowardice within himself. When Althea finished picking up the last bill, she stood up the stack of money, now neatly organized in her hands. She placed it carefully into her leather bag, then looked straight into Brittany's eyes for one final moment. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear, carrying more weight than any scolding could. The smile on Brittany's face instantly faded, replaced by confusion and a hint of fear. Althea turned and walked away. Her back was straight, her head held high. She wasn't fleeing, she was leaving with pride. As she exited through the glass doors, she left behind a storm of chaos and thoughtful stares. Little did she know Thomas Wells had been watching her, his eyes full of regret and a new determination slowly forming within him. Althea sat in her car, hands resting on the steering wheel. Only in the privacy of her car did she allow herself to exhale deeply. The tension that had been building in her chest throughout the morning seemed to dissipate. She wondered if that incident was worth letting it affect such an important day. But then her phone buzzed. A message from Liam appeared on the screen. "Evergreen is ready. They're waiting for the final signature." That brief message pulled her back into reality. The humiliation at the bank was just a fleeting moment, while the $2 billion merger was the future. She had spent too much time on that petty issue. She quickly regained her calm and professionalism. Looking in the rearview mirror, she saw Thomas Wells standing in the parking lot, holding his phone. Without hesitation, Althea started the car and drove off, leaving the Bank of Sterling and its narrow prejudices behind. At the same time, in the Evergreen Logistics conference room, Thomas Wells had arrived. He sat across from an older man, Thomas Wells, the chairman of Evergreen. His face showed seriousness as he recounted the events. "I witnessed everything," he said. "They humiliated her, just because of her appearance, because of her skin color. A truth we must face." Back at the bank after Althea had left, the atmosphere remained tense. Brittany, her face full of panic, rushed into Robert Hughes' office. "Mr. Robert, what do I do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Robert Hughes, pale-faced, growled. "I told you to delete all the footage. If Althea Thorne files a complaint, I don't want any evidence against us." Brittany quickly nodded, running out. But in a corner, Sophia Martinez had overheard everything. Her conscience stirred. She had witnessed Brittany's discriminatory behavior for a long time, and Robert's cowardice. She knew that if she didn't do something, the truth would forever be buried. Sophia decided to take action. She waited until her colleagues weren't paying attention, then sneaked into the security room and copied the footage onto a small USB drive. She knew this could cost her job, but she couldn't let this incident fade into silence. She had decided to send the footage to someone she believed would use it the right way. At the end of the workday, Althea sat in her office gazing out at the twinkling lights of New York City. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, Ms. Thorne. "This is Sophia Martinez. I have the security footage from this morning's incident. I think you need it." Althea smiled. Her eyes gleamed with a spark. This was no longer a personal matter. It was time to make a decision, a cold calculation, and an action that no one would expect. She now had the evidence, and it was time to create consequences. As night fell, Althea sat in her office, gazing out at the sparkling lights of the city. The hustle and bustle of a busy day had faded away, leaving only her own solitude. She held her phone, rereading Sophia Martinez's message. The brief text contained immense power, a truth that could shake an entire system. Althea didn't call Sophia back immediately. She needed some time to think. She didn't want to act on impulse, but according to a plan. A light knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Thomas Wells walked in, holding an iPad. His face was serious tense. Thomas had spent most of the day watching and rewatching the video that Sophia had sent him, which Thomas had then forwarded to Althea. Both of them knew they now had irrefutable evidence. "The deal is done," Thomas said, his voice heavy with weight. "But I feel like we need to talk more about what happened." Althea nodded. "I think so too. Thomas, you've had a long day. Would you like a drink?" Thomas shook his head. "No, thank you. I need to stay sharp to talk about this. I've already told the board about the incident at the bank. I proposed a specific action, but they dismissed it." "What did they say?" Althea asked, her gaze fully focused on him. They said it was a private matter unrelated to business. They said I was overreacting. Thomas shared, his voice filled with disappointment. But I know that's not the truth. I'm ashamed I didn't have the courage to speak up and defend fairness. Althea looked at Thomas, seeing the regret in his eyes. Thomas, I understand. You're someone who works by principle. But maybe their principles have been swayed by interests. What will you do? Thomas asked, his eyes full of worry. If you release the video, it could affect the merger deal. It could destabilize the market. Althea smiled mysteriously. I won't release the video, at least not now. I'm going to do something else. Something no one expects. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Brittany's life was beginning to crumble. She had been forced to resign by Robert Hughes. When her parents found out, they were disappointed and ashamed. Brittany tried to post a video on social media explaining that it was just an accident, but it only made everyone angrier. She became the target of insults and criticism. Brittany couldn't understand why things had escalated so far. Little did she know her life had been forever changed by a tiny video. Althea sat in her office watching Thomas Wells leave. She nodded to herself. A plan had formed in her mind. This was not about personal revenge. This was about sending a message. True power doesn't come from loud accusations, but from intentional actions. She called Liam Carter in. Liam, prepare to withdraw all of Thorn Innovations' accounts from Bank of Sterling. All of them. Do it as discreetly as possible and make sure no information leaks. We'll do this the same day we announce the merger. Liam, who was accustomed to Althea's decisiveness, still couldn't hide his surprise. All of them? Over $80 million? Althea nodded. Yes. And I want you to research all the financial ties between Evergreen Logistics and Bank of Sterling. I want to know everything. Althea's plan was not a rash act of revenge. She knew that releasing the video now could cause unnecessary disruption, overshadowing the value of the merger. Instead, she chose a different method, a powerful withdrawal. Losing a major client like Thorn Innovations would strike a severe blow to Bank of Sterling, and if it happened at the same time as a billion-dollar deal, no one would be able to ignore it. Days later, Thomas Wells sat in his office staring at the financial news. Evergreen's board still held firm, claiming that Althea's story was a small matter. That cowardice left him feeling disappointed and ashamed. Thomas realized he couldn't continue working with a company so lacking in integrity. He drafted a short but heavy resignation letter citing ethical differences. Before sending it, he called an old friend, a reputable reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Vanessa, he said, I have a story you'll want to hear. At Bank of Sterling, the atmosphere had grown tense. Robert Hughes called Brittany into his office. His face was exhausted. They've asked me to hand over all the footage and information about the incident, he said, his voice trembling. Brittany, we need to act. He handed Brittany an envelope. This is an agreement. The bank will pay you 2 months' salary and a small sum in exchange for you signing a non-disclosure agreement and quietly resigning. This is your best chance to get out of this. Brittany, still immersed in her self-importance, refused. Resign. After they just promoted me, I didn't do anything wrong. It was just an accident. Robert looked at Brittany with disappointment. He realized that not only did she lack integrity, but also awareness. This is not just an accident, Brittany, he said, his voice cold. The video speaks for itself. You're making it harder on yourself. On the morning of the merger announcement, Althea wore a custom-tailored charcoal gray suit. The Dignity Always necklace gleamed around her neck, a reminder of her core values. Liam entered, his face filled with anticipation. Everything is ready, he reported. The press release will go out at 10 a.m., and our financial team is ready for your signal. Althea nodded calmly. She knew this moment was not only the pinnacle of a business deal, it was a moment of truth and consequence, and she was ready. The morning of the announcement, a solemn yet tense atmosphere enveloped the Thorn Tower. Althea, dressed in her perfectly cut gray suit, looked at the photo of her mother. The Dignity Always necklace sparkled in the light. She was ready. "Liam, the press release will go out at 10 a.m. "The financial team is ready," Althea said, her tone calm but authoritative. "And Plan B?" Liam asked, understanding that this was not just a business deal. "Plan B is Plan A." Althea smiled. "This is not about revenge, Liam. This is a statement. It will end where it all began." Just minutes before 10 a.m., Althea walked into the Bank of Sterling branch with her 3 lawyers. Her face was calm and composed with no trace of anger. The sight immediately attracted attention. Robert Hughes, the branch manager, saw Althea and turned pale. He rushed over, attempting a forced smile. "Good morning, Miss Thorne," he said. "I'm surprised to see you here. Perhaps we should talk in my office?" "No need, Mr. Brum," Robert Althea replied coldly and clearly. "I'm here to close all my accounts." From his office, Brittany saw Althea. She froze, trying to make sense of the situation. "What's going on?" she asked a colleague, then walked over to Althea. "No problem," Althea replied, turning to look directly at Brittany. "I'm just withdrawing all my money from here." One of Althea's lawyers stepped forward, handing Robert a stack of documents. "These are all the papers to close the accounts. We just need your signature to finalize it." Robert took the stack of papers, his face growing paler as he saw the figures on the documents. This wasn't just one account, but all of Thorn Innovations' accounts totaling over $80 million. A group of financial reporters tipped off by an anonymous source was waiting outside the bank. They snapped photos of the moment Althea walked in. These photos would quickly become part of a larger story. When the paperwork was done, Althea turned and looked directly at Brittany, who was now completely stunned. "Self-respect doesn't cost anything," Althea said, her voice small but heavy. "But its absence? It just cost you $2 billion. Althea left the bank, walking past the cameras, leaving behind chaos and a chilling warning. Instantly, the stock of Bank of Sterling began to drop. At the same time, Thomas Wells, seeing the news on Bloomberg, finally made his decision. He sent a resignation letter to the Evergreen board, citing ethical differences as his reason. He was no longer a silent witness. Right after Althea left, the paparazzi snapped the moment she walked out of the bank. Simultaneously, the press release announcing the $2 billion merger was published, causing the stocks of Thorn Innovations and Evergreen Logistics to skyrocket. These two seemingly unrelated events were now connected by a truth slowly emerging to the surface. The security footage sent by Sophia to a close journalist of Thomas Wells was leaked and spread at lightning speed across social media. The video of Brittany deliberately throwing the money to the floor, contrasting with Althea's composed demeanor, sparked an outrage. Hashtags, #dignity, always, and #respect costs. Nothing quickly became trending, transforming what started as a minor incident into a larger cultural movement. Financial news outlets from the Wall Street Journal to Bloomberg all covered the incident. They analyzed the market shock when Bank of Sterling stock plummeted after Thorn Innovations withdrew all their accounts. Everyone was trying to find a connection between the mysterious money withdrawal and the viral video. At Bank of Sterling, panic reached its peak. Robert Hughes was summoned by his superiors for an emergency meeting. Brittany, in her desperation, deleted her self-satisfied TikTok video, but it was too late. The video had already been copied and reposted thousands of times, turning her arrogant words into evidence against herself. Meanwhile, Althea maintained her composure. She made no comments to the press. She continued focusing on the integration of Evergreen Logistics into Thorne Innovations. Her power lay not in having to explain herself, but in letting her actions and the consequences speak for themselves. A few days later, an exclusive article in the Wall Street Journal fully revealed the entire story. The article featured an interview with Thomas Wells, who had resigned from the board of Evergreen Logistics. "I witnessed the incident with my own eyes," Thomas said in the interview. "When I raised my concerns, the board dismissed them. I couldn't continue working with an organization where ethics and self-respect were not valued. Sometimes silence is complicity." This interview was a blow to Bank of Sterling and a bold statement from someone who had once remained silent. In the midst of the chaos, Sophia Martinez received a phone call from Althea. "Hello, Sophia," Althea said. "I know what's happening. You've shown courage. I'd like to offer you an analyst position at Thorne Innovations." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. She had once thought her career was over, but now a new door had opened for her. Meanwhile, Brittany tried to post another video, attempting to defend her actions, claiming it was just an accident and that she had been destroyed by the media. But it was too late. Even her mother, a former renowned civil rights lawyer, publicly spoke out. "I've spent my whole life fighting for the values my daughter trampled upon," she said at a press conference. "I apologize to Ms. Althea Thorne and to everyone who has ever been treated this way. This is my failure as a parent." Her mother's heartbreaking statement was the final blow to Brittany's arrogance, forcing her to confront the fact that her downfall was not caused by others, but by her own actions. Brittany's mother's statement was a crushing blow, completely dismantling the wall of arrogance she had built. She was no longer a victim of social media destruction, but the central figure in a complete moral failure acknowledged by her own family. All doors had been slammed shut. Companies began removing Brittany from their recruitment lists, and she became a symbol of thoughtless discrimination. Everything in her life, from her career reputation to even her family relationships, collapsed. At Bank of Sterling, the senior leadership finally had to take action. In an emergency meeting, they decided to make Robert Hughes the scapegoat. Despite having served the bank for over 15 years, Robert was forced to resign. His cowardice in defending the truth had come back to haunt him. The bank then issued a vague statement apologizing for the inconvenience caused and promising to implement mandatory sensitivity training. But it was too late. Major clients began pulling their funds, and the bank's stock continued to plummet, driving it to the brink of collapse. While the media storm raged on, Althea remained perfectly composed. She didn't speak out, nor did she appear in public. She devoted all her time to the merger, ensuring everything proceeded smoothly. Her power lay not in proving her righteousness, but in demonstrating that righteousness could lead to success. One morning, Althea received a handwritten letter from Thomas Wells. It was short, yet filled with emotion. "Althea, what I witnessed at the bank that day changed me, but the way you responded changed me even more. You showed me that true leadership is not about being the loudest, but about acting with purpose and integrity. You've changed the way I work, the way I listen, and the way I teach my son. I don't know what to say other than thank you." Althea carefully folded the letter and placed it in her desk drawer. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest impact comes from moments of silence and integrity. A few days later, at a press conference, Althea officially announced the creation of the Eleanor Thorne Institute, named after her late mother. "My mother taught me that true strength is not in putting others down," she said, "but in lifting those who have not yet had a chance." The Institute would provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and professional development resources for minority women in finance and business. The news immediately caught attention. Other corporations, eager to align themselves with a leader of such integrity as Althea, began making substantial contributions. From an initial investment, the Eleanor Thorne Institute quickly grew into a multi-million-dollar fund. One of the first recipients of a full scholarship from the Institute was Sophia Martinez. Althea surprised her with the announcement, along with a small note. This scholarship covers all tuition and childcare expenses. You can work here while continuing your education. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. She never expected that her courage would bring about such a life-changing opportunity. The founding of the Eleanor Thorne Institute created an unprecedented positive wave. Althea received praise not only from the media, but from other successful women who had faced similar prejudices. They viewed Althea as a symbol of quiet power and self-respect. Meanwhile, Brittany's life had completely changed. Blacklisted from the banking industry, she was forced to move to another city and take a sales job at a small retail store. Everything from her luxurious suits, pearl necklace, and false respect was gone. In its place, a simple uniform and comfortable shoes for long working hours. One afternoon, her mother, Eleanor Wilson, visited her. Their conversation was not one of reproach, but of forgiveness and hope. It was the moment Brittany began to realize her mistakes and felt a deep desire to atone for them. Not long after, a shocking headline appeared in the news. Bank of Sterling, after a series of investigations into its discriminatory culture, was acquired by Liberty Union, a credit union owned by people of color, renowned for its commitment to integrity and community investment. Marcus Johnson, CEO of Liberty Union, declared, "This is not just a financial transaction. This is a restructuring. We will turn a troubled organization into one that serves all people with respect and dignity." It was a symbolic punishment and the highest form of justice. Althea, who never sought recognition, continued with her work. The Eleanor Thorne Institute continued to flourish. A 16-year-old girl named Ava Williams wrote to her saying that because of Althea's story, she had started a tutoring network for students in underprivileged neighborhoods. Thomas Wells published a best-selling book on leadership ethics, dedicating a chapter to Althea's story. He sent her a copy with a dedication. True strength is not measured by how loudly you speak, but by how your actions make your values clear. On a rainy afternoon, Althea received a phone call from the White House. The president wanted her to consider a position in the cabinet overseeing the implementation of new banking regulations. It was an enticing offer, a chance to change policy at the highest level. But after careful consideration, Althea declined. She told the president's advisor, "That's not my battlefield. My battlefield is here at the Eleanor Thorne Institute." On the day of the groundbreaking for the Institute's new headquarters, Althea stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Thomas Wells, Sophia Martinez, and Ava's family were all present. This was a picture of the people who had been changed by what seemed like a small moment. Althea didn't raise her voice, didn't express anger. She simply used her actions to show the world that self-respect is an unstoppable force. Her legacy wasn't in numbers, but in lives changed and values strengthened. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Eleanor Thorne Institute's new headquarters was a resounding success. Althea stood at the podium, looking into the crowd. Thomas Wells, Sophia Martinez, and Ava's family were all present. This was a living picture of people changed by what seemed like a small moment. Althea's legacy was not in numbers, but in lives transformed and values reinforced. On a quiet afternoon, Althea received a phone call. It was a young woman, her voice full of hesitation. "Hello, Ms. Thorne," she said. "My name is Belle Miller. My daughter Brittany used to work at Bank of Sterling. I want to apologize on her behalf." Althea listened in silence. She knew Belle was beginning her own journey to atone. In the years that followed, the Eleanor Thorne Institute grew exponentially. Althea turned down many tempting offers, including a position in the president's cabinet, to focus on the Institute's mission. She created a new generation of leaders, people who were not only skilled, but also full of self-respect. And then one early morning, Althea sat in her office. She looked at the picture of her mother, then gazed out at the city's sparkling lights. She had done what her mother always hoped for. True strength doesn't come from putting others down, but from lifting them up. Self-respect is not a luxury. It is a power that can change the world.